Hi, I'm Professor Larry Louie, and welcome to the Brown Business Bootcamp. This is going to be a video lecture on the basics of economic statistics and analysis to give you a flavor of the types of things we do quantitatively in the area of finance and business in general. The topics of today will cover two main areas. First, in the area of economics, where we start with a look at the invisible hand of how the markets work and what gives rise to the demand on the consumer side and the supply from the producer side. Then we'll turn our attention to costs and profits for the firm. First, we'll look at costs and how they behave over different volumes, and then we'll apply the techniques of cost, volume, profit to break-even analysis and introduce other things that can be done with CVP. We'll then look at time value of money, which is essential in the area of finance, and then we'll turn to the second major topic, which is statistics. We'll look at two topics. One is the description of a distribution of data. We'll look at mean, median, and standard deviation. We'll also look at a tool that's used quite often in predicting or estimating factors or variables, and that's called regressions. So that's our topic for today. Oh, by the way, we're going to be doing exercises in class utilizing these techniques and others. The invisible hand, as Adam Smith coined, is the idea that the markets are self-regulating. The supply and demand somehow magically meet to establish the proper pricing for the quantity and price at equilibrium. And we'll look at how these work by breaking them into components. We'll start with demand. How do we estimate demand? Well, demand is described by this curve, where we have price on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis. They're inversely related. In other words, the higher the price, the less is purchased. The lower the price, the more is purchased. I think you know from your own experience that to be true. How is this determined? Well, it's determined by looking at the expectations of all the members of that market. It could be individual consumers, and they have different preferences for different types of products, and those are aggregated in order to get this overall demand curve for a given product. Advertising and consumer tastes have some bearing as well. We know from advertising that we see that we may be induced to try something out, or it may reinforce something we've purchased in the past and say, oh, I haven't had that for a while. It's also influenced by population. The more people there are, the more possibilities for individual wanting to buy that particular product. There are also some effects that economists measure that relate to income. As your income rises for certain types of goods, we buy more of it. So if buying something like airline travel, the more money we have, the more likely we are to travel. On the other hand, there are certain goods that the more money we have, the less we use. The example might be riding the train. If you have less money, you may be on a budget and your transportation would be by train. If you have higher income, you can forego the train and take the airplane. So the first group is called a normal good, where the more money you have by way of income, the more you purchase because you could afford more. The second is called an inferior good, where the more money you have, actually the less you consume. Seems illogical, but I think you can imagine trains or other things where you might buy less of, maybe peanut butter or ramen noodles because your budget has increased. Next is price of related goods. If the alternative goods drop in price, your demand for this product will drop. For example, Pepsi. If you drink Pepsi and all of a sudden Coca-Cola prices drop dramatically, you might say, I'll save the extra money and move over to Coca-Cola. So that's an example of a substitute. Then there's complementary goods, such as gasoline and cars. If the cost of gasoline rises, the demand for gas-guzzling muscle cars will go down, and the demand for more economical cars will go up. So we can see that demand is comprised of an aggregation of consumers that are affected by many, many factors. On the other side, we have supply. These are the people that produce the goods. And here, it's the opposite relationship. In other words, the higher the price, the more you're willing to sell. If you're manufacturing a product and the price is low, you'd be less inclined to make it. However, if the price rises, you say, I'll do some of that. I'll have some of that market. So our cost structure matters because the lower the cost, the more induced you are to, even at a low price, produce products. The other consideration is maybe costs are a little bit high now, but in the long run, with a lot of volume, it will go down. So that might induce you to still enter the market. Third are substitutes in production. We may determine that things that we use steel for can now be made out of plastic. Not all components, but the ones that are able to be substituted for lower cost goods, you might be induced to do so. Then there's technology, manufacturing technology to, again, lower the cost of manufacturing a product, therefore having the cost per unit drop, and therefore at a given market price, you'd be more willing and able to produce products at that price. Then there's the environment itself, the behavior of other people in the market, your competitors. That would have some bearing on the amount of supply that would be generated for the overall product in the market overall. And finally, product line considerations. You may be willing to take a lower profit on certain products, such as the cost of a copier machine, because you make money on the toner. HP and other printer manufacturers have done that for years. They sell the printers at a low price because they get you hooked on buying their toners or their cartridges. When we put these together, we see the operation of the invisible hand, because the markets will reach an equilibrium where the price and quantity are just right for producers to want to produce and consumers willing to consume. And this is how the markets work. And we'll look a little bit at why does it have to work this way with a couple of scenarios.